Thanks everyone for joining the August Community Support Waiver Town Hall. We are going to get started. Next slide, please. I'm going to turn it over to Michelle to welcome everyone.
Yeah, thank you very much. We are going to be talking today about waiver enrollment services and provider qualifications. Elian's going to lead that discussion from CG. Really glad you could all join us today. And as we go through the presentation, we can ask questions at the close of the presentation. So I'll turn it over to Elian. Thank you.
Thanks for that introduction, Michelle. Hi, everyone. My name is Elian. I will be presenting some updates for you all about the community support waiver. So first, I have some updates for you about Appendix B of the waiver application. Then I will talk about Appendix E and Appendix C, and then we'll close with a wrap up. So to get started, Appendix B, this is a section that discusses how people enroll in the waiver. So I have some updates for you about that process. The table that I have here shows the number of waiver spots that are available on the CSW. So in year 1, there will be 500 spots. In year 2, there will be 1,000. And in year 3, there will be 1,500 spots. Individuals who are on the IDD waiver waiting list who choose to enroll in the CSW will not be able to keep their spot on the IDD waiver waiting list. Additionally, the CSW will not have a waiting list. That means that once all available slots are full, KDADS will not accept or process any additional applications until space becomes available again. KDADS will give priority to eligible applicants for the CSW based on how long they have spent on the IDD waiver waiting list. That means that we'll start with those that have spent the most time on the IDD waiver waiting list. And once all applications from people who have been on the IDD waiver waiting list have been processed, KDADS will then offer enrollment to CSW applicants who are not currently on the IDD waiting list according to the date of their CSW application. So once priority applications have been processed from people who are currently on the IDD waiver waiting list based on how long they have been on that waiting list, all other applications will be processed on a first come, first served basis. Have this table here to show you the reserve capacity numbers for the CSW. And so reserve capacity allows states to hold space on their waivers for specific groups and allow those individuals to enroll right away. So in each year of the waiver, 200 spots will be held for individuals who are currently on the IDD waiver and wish to transition to the CSW. Additionally, there will be 20 spots per year for children who are in foster care, who are in DCF custody. There will be 2 spots per year for military service members and their immediate family members. There will be 2 spots per year for children who are no longer eligible for the technology assisted or TA waiver. 5 spots per year for individuals no longer eligible for the brain injury BI waiver. 5 spots per year for individuals who are on either the IDD waiver or the CSW, who then enrolled in the Works program and now wish to enroll in the CSW. 15 spots per year for individuals who are transitioning from institutional settings into the community, and that includes transitions from psychiatric residential treatment facilities. 10 spots per year for individuals who entered an institution for fewer than 60 days. And then in the first 2 years of the waiver, there will be 65 spots held for children who are determined to be no longer eligible for the autism waiver. I'll now pause here and see if there are any questions on the information that I have just presented. If you do have a question, feel free to put it in the Q&A.
Elian, we got a question in the, we got a few questions actually. So the first one's actually in the chat. Basically, how will we notify people as to when there are openings again on the CSW?
Yeah, thanks for that question. I'm gonna throw it back to you, Michelle, or from someone else from KDADS to see if you can shed any light on how that information will be communicated with participants if that decision has been made at this time.
This is Robin. Are you talking about openings again on the CSW waiver?
Yeah,
Right. Okay. We still have to go and, detail out a lot of that stuff. So we're not sure yet, but we will be figuring that out hopefully in like the next month or so.
Thank you, Robin. So Tiffany, we'll make sure everybody gets notified of that as we sort of work out this process. As we've been clear throughout, this is sort of an ongoing initiative we're developing. Eliana, a question from Colleen, just asking for some confirmation. So people who are on the IDD wait list will lose that spot once they join the CSW. Is that an accurate representation?
yeah, that is correct. So KDAD's policy is that an individual cannot be receiving waiver services on one waiver and on the waiting list for another waiver. So that's true across the board. And in this case, what it means is that individuals who are on the waiting list for the IDD who choose to enroll in the CSW will not be able to keep their spot.
Thank you. And a question from Shirsti Stanton. This is more or less asking, Eliana, do we have any guidance for, recommendations for people, deciding whether they should continue staying on the IDD waitlist versus switching over to the CSW?
Yeah, it's a great question, and it really is kind of a case by case question, depending on where you're at at the waiting list, and also the CSW and the IDD waiver do have some important differences in the services that are available. Additionally, the CSW offers participants greater opportunities to self-direct their services, and so it is kind of it's a personal decision and one that can be made with guidance from your CDDO, from your TCM if you have one, to help kind of think through what the best options for you are. I'll pause though and see if Kate adds if there's any more information you want to add to that question.
Yeah, Eliana, I think you covered it, where, it's gonna be a personal decision, and we certainly, as we move forward, we want people to really be thinking about which waiver would serve their needs the most.
Thank you, Michelle. Ellie, I'll start with you on this one, and this might be something Michelle wants to weigh in as well. We have a question from Jeanette Livingston, just asking for clarification of what you mean specifically when you refer to children no longer eligible for the autism waiver as a priority group.
Yeah, so for example, the autism waiver, people can stay on it, I believe for 4 years once they enroll. And so somebody who may be currently on the autism waiver, but their eligibility is running out because they've been on it for right around 4 years, would then have priority for enrollment. But I will again throw it back to you, Michelle, or to Robin to see if there's any more information you want to add about the autism waiver.
Yeah, Jeanette, it's Michelle. We have, I don't want to go into a lot of detail because we don't have any, but we are looking at, if we go with the community support waiver, that whether we'll continue doing the autism waiver, but that is a long conversation to have. If we do sunset the autism waiver, we'll need to bring children onto the CSW. There's only 65 slots on the autism waiver, and I think we all know that there's been problems as far as having a provider network for that, and we're hoping that with the CSW there would be more opportunities for children on that waiver, because it's a bigger waiver. We would expect to have a bigger provider network. But we haven't made any decisions at this time. We're just in the initial stages of thinking about that.
Michelle, a question from April Hoffman about sort of the no wait list. This is akin to Tiffany's question, basically asking how will people know when a space opens on the CSW and they're able to access services. So, Elian, I'll start on this one. As we told Tiffany, we're still sort of working out the notification process. You know, like everything else we've done with the waiver, we'll make sure we're transparent with y'all and get you that information as soon as possible. That being said, Elian, I don't know if there's anything already in place for sort of, let's say, notifying people if they do get a spot on the CSW.
Yeah, Peter, I think as Robin kind of got to with Tiffany's question, that's something that KDADS is still working out, just how, participants will be informed. And as you said, just as soon as there is more information about that process, KDADS will be able to share it. But certainly, yes, KDADS is currently working to think about how best people can be informed about the ability to apply for waiver spots.
Thank you. So April, we appreciate the question. You know, we obviously know this is something people will be very interested in hearing more about. So we'll make sure that goes up on the website, and most likely we have a town hall about it sometime in the future. So Elian, I think I can at least start with this question from Judith. Judith is asking if sort of our priority applicants do not end up using the full spots, if they will be offered to others. I think the answer is yes. As you laid out, there's sort of a priority process. You know, we run through some of the reserve capacity groups and then sort of, throw things open to, people who didn't fall under one of those categories. You know, we want to make sure we fill as many of these waiver spots as possible. So that's certainly a priority for us. Elian, anything to add there?
Yeah, just to give a little bit more detail to
Yeah.
that. So for the first come, first serve spots, those will be opened up just as soon as priority enrollment is offered to people who've been on the IDD waiver waiting list. In terms of the reserve capacity, those spots are kind of held in perpetuity open for the groups that they are designated for. That said, if it turns out that those numbers are not an accurate estimation of need, Kansas can submit a waiver amendment to change those numbers. That's not a big deal. So if it happens that Kansas sort of put aside more spots than are necessary, that is a change that can be made down the line to free up more space. Additionally, space may become available if additional spots are offered via, more legislative funding for the waiver or other opportunities. So it's sort of kind of an ongoing process of managing the allocation and determining if more spots need to be made available. Is there anything, KDADS, that I missed in that answer?
Leon, I think you did a good job of covering it. Thank you.
Great, thanks.
And Elian, a question from Dan Armstrong. If you could just go into a little bit more about the process for how the slots for reserve capacity were established. I mean, I assume it's in conversation with the tag, some of our other subject matter experts and partners. But if you could just elaborate a little bit, I think, Dan and others would probably appreciate it.
Yeah, absolutely, Dan. So the numbers are based on kind of a handful of different factors. The 200 spots that are held for people who are on the IDD waiver, that is certainly intended to help reduce the IDD waiver waiting list, because if we're able to clear up 200 spots per year from people currently on the IDD waiver, that opens up another 200 spots for people who are on the waiting list for the IDD waiver to then enroll in the IDD waiver itself. So in that sense, that is kind of the intent of this reserve capacity. For those other groups, it's sort of a combination of factors based off of the reserve capacity that is also held on the IDD waiver, wanting to make sure that those groups are also given a spot on the CSW, which again supports reducing the waiting list by helping people who otherwise would be waiting on the IDD waiting list or hoping to get a spot through the IDD reserve capacity, who are instead able to enroll directly into the CSW. So it is still part of that broader goal of clearing up the waiting list and or removing space and making sure that kind of groups that have specific needs are able to get their needs met through the CSW right away.
Elian, I'll start with you on this one, but this feels like a KDAD's question. Do you know how people find out where they are on the IDD wait list?
Yeah, I think that is a KDAD's question. If I can throw it back to you, Michelle or Robin.
I can-
Robin.
Thanks, Michelle. Yeah, if you're like guardian or the person themselves and release information, all that stuff, you can contact KDADS. To answer your question specifically, usually what we would do, it would give you the date that the person went on the wait list, and then we can kind of let you know, the last round, what dates that encompassed. But it's difficult to kind of predict how many waitlist offers go out per year and things of that nature. So we can give you the date that someone, with proper documentation, right, when that person went on the wait list. And the CDDOs might also have that information as well, but they also may not. So it's okay to contact me at KDADS.
Thank you, Robin. Eliane, I think these last two questions could probably start with you as well. I know we've talked a little bit about transitioning from the IDD waitlist to the CSW. Could you just talk briefly about sort of the other way around? If potentially the CSW doesn't cover somebody's needs and they want to transition to the IDD waiver?
Yeah, absolutely. So I can shed a little bit of light on this, but I do want to just flag that the kind of policy questions in terms of getting on to the IDD waiver from the CSW or from anywhere else are questions that are addressed on the IDD waiver side of things. So these aren't directly a part of the community support waiver. That said, the IDD waiver does have a crisis exception for people who are in crisis, whose needs are not being met currently. And my understanding, KDADS, please correct me if I'm wrong, is that that policy will still be available if somebody's needs are not being met on the CSW. They may be eligible to use the crisis exception policy on the IDD waiver if a crisis is occurring because their needs aren't being met, to then get onto the IDD waiver. Is that right?
Yes.
Okay, great.
Thank you, everybody. That takes care of the questions thus far. I think we can move on, and then we'll circle back to any remaining questions as we sort of, hit our next question period.
Thanks so much, Peter. So next I have some slides for you on Appendix E and self-direction. So pulling that up, at our last town hall, Jackie presented on Appendix E, which discusses the self-direction opportunities available on the community support waiver. And we discussed that the participant can choose a designated representative to help them direct their services. During the Q&A at the last town hall, someone asked if a TCM or a service provider could act as a participant's designated representative for self-direction. The answer to that is no. A designated representative cannot be the participant's TCM, service provider, or anyone else who would otherwise financially benefit from the services provided to the participant. I hope that clears up that question. Also, we're asked about how the state ensures that there is not a conflict of interest with a designated representative. The state prevents anyone who would financially benefit from waiver services from being involved in the person-centered planning process or directing a participant's waiver services. Designated representatives must comply with state policies for mitigating potential conflicts of interest. And so on these slides, which will be posted to the Kansas CSW website, we have linked here the KDAD's conflict of interest memo and policy in case anybody wants to read the details of those policy in more detail. And I will pause here as well to see if there are any other questions about this topic of designated representatives that I can answer right now.
Hey, Eliane, we don't have any questions specifically on Appendix E yet. I'll hold for a second, but while we're waiting, I think we can take care of the two we do have. Michelle, we have a sort of timeline question. I think you would be the best person to answer. This is from Shiersty Stanton, just asking when the CSW will launch, basically when it'll become available for people.
That's a really good question. There are a lot of mitigating factors. We're aiming for July of 2026. But CMS has to approve it. Now with House Bill 2440, we have to go through the Legislative Coordinating Committee, so that adds another step. But we're pretty confident that we can get it out the door by the third quarter of next year. But we're still working through that. There's a lot of different moving pieces and parts that are all interconnected, and we have to get them all in a certain order to get it out the door at the right time. So we are looking for next year. Hopefully we will get it as soon as we can, but you know, CMS has their own timeline, the legislature has their own timeline. But we're working very hard to get it out the door as quickly as possible.
Thank you, Michelle. While I have you too, I think we're going to need to rely on you for this next one. Just asking how many individuals currently on the IDD waitlist would qualify for the CSW. I don't know, that might not be information we even have sort of offhand right now, but you would be the one, I assume, who would if we did.
So as long as they meet the level of care tool, which is now changed to the MFEI, which is extremely close to the basis, then they will qualify for the CSW. You know, if they don't need 24-hour supports. Because the CSW is not designed to provide that kind of 24-hour support. It's more of a IDD waiver light. But we believe that, you know, all the people on the wait list will go through the same level of care tool with the MFEI, and we're using the same assessment for both waivers.
Thank you, Michelle. Eliane, we still haven't gotten any questions about Appendix E specifically, and that takes care of our present open questions. So I think we're good to move on.
Okay.
All right. Great. Thank you so much, Peter. So next up, I have some slides on Appendix C. And now Appendix C of the waiver, it lists out all the services that are included in the CSW and the provider qualifications for those services. We presented these at previous town halls, and the proposed service definitions and provider qualifications are posted on the Kansas CSW website for folks to read and provide feedback on. There is a feedback form on the CSW website for you to leave any feedback you have. There are also some additional sections of Appendix C that we have not yet presented on. So that's what I'm going to be going over today in this section. And I will pause at the end for questions, but of course, feel free to add any that you have in the Q&A at any time. So first off, I'm just going to go over kind of the topics for discussion today. So I will be talking through some of the updates that KDADS has made to service definitions and provider qualifications. Then we will discuss changes to the TCM training requirements, safeguards for when services are delivered virtually, CSW services that can be provided by legally responsible individuals such as guardians or relatives, and then I'll also go over some waiver limits and safeguards. So first off, updates to service definitions and provider qualifications. KDADS has made some changes to the draft service definitions and provider qualifications. The $10,000 lifetime limit on home modifications, vehicle modifications, and specialized medical equipment and supplies was removed. So now the only limit on these services would be the $20,000 annual cap set by the legislature for all CSW participants. KDADS has also removed the requirement for providers of assistive technology, home modifications, vehicle modifications, and specialized medical equipment and supplies to be affiliated with a CDDO. These providers will no longer have to affiliate with CDDOs. And KDADS has also removed the requirement for non-medical transportation providers to complete training on restraint, restrictive interventions, crisis prevention, and crisis intervention. The reason this training requirement was removed is so that it better matches the provider requirements for state plan transportation services. Now the provider requirements are the same for both state plan transportation and the CSW non-medical transportation service, so providers can easily offer both services if they wish. KDADS has also removed a restriction that prevented other waiver services from being billed at the same time as individual employment support services. This restriction was removed to take into account that a participant may need to receive both personal care services and individual employment support services while at work. Lastly, KDES has increased the allowable group size for family/caregiver support and training from 3 to 4 families. And I'll pause here to see if there are any questions on these updates that KDES has made to the CSW service definitions and provider qualifications. Giving it just another minute.
Yeah, we've got one, Elion. This is mostly just asking for clarification around the reduced training requirement for NEMT. Could
Oh,
you
yeah.
explain the rationale a little bit if we have that information?
Yeah, so that actually is a new training requirement. So it has not been required in the past of any providers, and as part of developing the CSW and thinking where maybe additional support for participants and their providers might be needed, it was decided that a number of providers ought to be receiving training on restraints, restrictive interventions, crisis prevention, and crisis intervention. And so initially, as that thinking was evolving, it was thought that requiring that training of non-emergency medical transportation providers might make sense. But after further consultation with KDADS and KDHE, and after seeing that the state plan amendment will not have any changes for the training requirements for the providers offering transportation under the state plan, it was decided that it was in the best interest of participants to keep the training requirements between the NEMT providers and the state plan transportation providers the same, so that those providers can provide both services without any difficulty, and so that participants aren't struggling to find a provider who can offer this service under the CSW. I hope that clarifies that.
Ellie, I'm assuming this next comment from Angie is just a request for clarification. I don't know if it's a question or a statement, but do you know if state plan NEMT is available to any Medicaid recipient, or if it's more broad than sort of CSW NEMT?
So yeah, I don't want to give false information. My understanding is that under the state plan, people can get like just general transportation services, whereas under the CSW, what's being offered is non-emergency medical transportation services. So that would be the distinction. But I will pause and see if KDADS, if there's any other clarification you're wanting to offer about the difference in these transportation services offered under the CSW versus the state plan.
Yeah, Elion, so if you have a medical card, you are eligible for emergency medical transportation and non-emergency medical transportation, which means, for doctor's appointments, it's that sort of thing. But transportation for other types of activities are not covered under the state plan. However, you can look at your managed care organization if you have a card with either United, Healthy Blue, or Sunflower, and go to the website and see if they offer any added bonuses, like they will provide so many trips, for different activities. But generally on the state plan, all you will get is the non-emergency medical transportation and the emergency medical transportation.
Thank you, Michelle. Angie, in the interest of time, hopefully we answered your question, but I will move on. If you'd like some more sort of granular information about how we arrived at this decision and how this aligns the state plan, the CSW, and how it's in the best interest of participants, please do email us. We're more than happy to give you that additional breakdown. But for now, at least I am going to sort of move on in the presentation. So Eliana, if you want to press ahead, I think we're ready to go.
Sounds good. Thanks, Peter. So next up, I have some updates on the TCM training requirements. As some of you may already know, CMS updated the application that states have to complete to apply for a new HCBS waiver. And in this new waiver application, CMS now requires that states detail or describe specifically how case managers are trained on HCBS settings regulations and person-centered service planning. KDADS is planning to update the state mandated training that all TCMs have to complete to include content on the HCBS settings regulations. The new training content will go into effect before KDADS implements the CSW, so that all targeted case managers providing case management services under the CSW are able to receive that new training. Next up, I have some information for you all about safeguards for the virtual delivery of services, or VDS. CMS now also requires states explain the safeguards that are in place when services are delivered virtually. In the new waiver application, states have to explain how remote services are delivered in a way that respects the privacy of the individual, especially in instances of toileting and dressing, things like that. How remote services facilitate community integration. How remote services ensure services for individuals who need hands-on assistance are delivered successfully, including whether the service can be rendered without somebody who is physically present. How the state will support individuals who need assistance with using the technology required for receiving remote services. And how remote services ensure the health and safety of the individual. KDADS has a current policy on the virtual delivery of services, and on this slide, we have linked the policy for folks to read if they are interested. The responses we included in the CSW draft are based on KDAD's current virtual delivery of services policy. So if you do want to take a look and get a better sense of what will be in the CSW as regards virtual delivery of services, you can find more information in KDAD's policy. Next up, still on virtual delivery of services, talking about making sure that participants' privacy is respected. So how is a participant's privacy respected when receiving virtual services? The participant or their guardian will always determine the placement of devices, equipment, or technology used in the virtual delivery of services. And the participant or their guardian will always have the ability to turn the device, the equipment, or technology on or off at any time. Virtual supports are also only permitted in bedrooms and bathrooms in instances when an evaluation shows that the technology increases the independence and facilitates a participant's right to privacy. That is very important, and the right to privacy is a key priority here in thinking about the virtual delivery of services. Virtual services in bedrooms and bathrooms can also only be provided with a signed consent from the participant, their guardian, the participant support team, and the MCO during the service planning process. Virtual delivery of service in bedrooms and bathrooms must be approved and evaluated during periodic reviews of the person-centered service plan, with a plan to decrease the need for the service as appropriate. Next up, in terms of how virtual delivery of service facilitates community integration for participants, providers offering virtual services must meet the following requirements to ensure the service delivery method does not isolate or regiment the participant from the greater community. Providers must deliver virtual services in the participant's preferred setting. Providers must allow the participant to rescind their choice of virtual services at any time and ensure the service continues in person if the participant no longer wants to receive the service virtually. And providers must educate and inform the participant on the scope of the virtual delivery of the service before the individual's choice for receiving virtual services is documented. For hands-on assistance, if a participant receives virtual services, the provider must maintain and train staff on written policies for identifying individuals, for example, natural support people or other paid provider staff, to intervene in an emergency. Providers will develop a written plan with the participant when they receive virtual services for whom to notify if the participant experiences an emergency during virtual service delivery. In terms of technology support, providers of virtual services must train the participant to operate technologies that facilitate successful virtual service delivery. The training could cover how to use a new device or could involve training the participant on how to use a new software or application on one of their existing devices. And the MCO that uses provider audits to monitor activities involved in virtual services to ensure compliance with relevant regulations and standards. For ensuring the health and safety of participants getting virtually delivered services, providers offering virtual services must develop, maintain, and enforce written policies that identify if virtual delivery can safely address the participant's needs, including health and safety. The participant's MCO care coordinator will monitor the participant's health, safety, and wellness, ensuring that any virtual services they receive are meeting the participant's needs. And I'm going to pause here to see if there are any questions on virtual service delivery safeguards before I move on to the next topic in Appendix C. Not seeing anything so far, so I think I'm going to move on. But again, of course, feel free to put anything in the chat and in the Q&A at any time, and we will get to it at the next question break. So next up, the next topic here is about when services can be provided by a legally responsible individual. Legally responsible individuals include the parent of a minor child, a spouse of a waiver participant, or a court-appointed guardian or activated durable power of attorney of a waiver participant. The CSW allows legally responsible individuals to be paid to provide personal care services so long as they meet the provider qualifications specified in the waiver and that any conflict of interest is mitigated. During the service planning process, the MCO care coordinator can complete a needs assessment with the participant that will distinguish between the activities that a parent or family member would ordinarily do and what we would consider extraordinary care. The needs assessment identifies areas in which the level of assistance or supervision required exceeds what is typically required for a person of the same age, and identifies the activities required to ensure the health and welfare of the participant and avoid institutionalization. The MCO care coordinator will inform participants that they have a choice in service providers and are not required to use any legally responsible individual unless the participant wants to. The person-centered service plan must state that the legally responsible individual is the best available, appropriate direct service worker for the participant. And when a legally responsible individual is paid to provide personal care services, the MCO care coordinator helps the participant establish a designated representative to be involved in service planning and mitigate the conflict of interest. Since some CSW services can also be provided by a relative. Relatives include anyone related to the participant by birth or marriage, other than those considered a legally responsible individual. And relatives can provide the following services when they meet the provider qualifications. They can provide home and environmental modification services. They can provide non-medical transportation, personal care services, respite, so long as they don't live in the same home as the participant, and vehicle modification services. When services are provided by a legally responsible individual or relative, the MCO care coordinator will collaborate with TCMs to monitor services to ensure the services meet the participant's need and that they're satisfied with their service providers. This monitoring occurs through regular touch points with the participant, their designated representative, unpaid caregivers, or other support people in the TCM. And at these regular touch points, the MCO care coordinator asks the participant to their support people how services are going, if services are meeting their needs, if they're satisfied with their service providers, and if any updates are needed to their person-centered service plans. If the MCO care coordinator has any concerns about the legally responsible individual or relative providing services, like they're worried that that individual is not acting in the best interest of the participant, they can speak with the MCO leadership, with MCO interdisciplinary teams, or state partners at KDADS and KDHE to resolve any concerns. MCO care coordinators are mandated reporters, and they will make adult protective services or APS reports in serious cases when investigations of abuse or neglect are needed. Any payments made to legally responsible individuals or relatives for providing services are limited to the scope, duration, and amount authorized in the participant's person-centered service plan. All direct service workers, including any legally responsible individuals or relatives providing services, must use the electronic visit verification or EVV system to document their hours delivering the service when required by that service. Alrighty, on to the next slide or the next section. So we presented previously about waiver limits and safeguards, and we've shared with you all that the CSW will have a $20,000 annual cap established by the legislature. But there are some additional details that CMS asks for in Appendix C related to that waiver limit. CMS asks states to identify if the waiver limit can be adjusted and if there are any exceptions. In the CSW draft, we have explained that KDADS can only adjust the $20,000 limit if a legislative appropriation provides additional funding, and that exceptions to the $20,000 limit are not allowed. We also have to identify who is responsible for notifying the participant about the waiver limit. In this case, the CDDO will be responsible for informing participants of the waiver limit when they provide options counseling. If a participant's needs change such that they cannot be met within the $20,000 limit, the participant's MCO care coordinator and TCM will help the participant obtain other non-waiver services to supplement what services they get through the CSW. If those supplemental services in combination with the CSW services still aren't enough to meet a participant's needs, then the MCO care coordinator will then consider whether the individual needs to transition to another HCBS waiver program that can accommodate the participant's needs, such as a comprehensive IDD waiver. I'll pause here, the question slide, see if there are any questions on anything I presented so far today on Appendix C, Appendix E, Appendix B, anything else that we can answer for you all today.
Elian, let me ask while we're waiting for questions, is this our final Q&A slide?
It is, yes.
Okay, then as Elian said, any questions on anything we talked about today? We have, I believe, 16 minutes remaining, so plenty of time to answer questions. I will say too, as we usually do during these presentations, if any questions come up later, you don't think of something in the moment or for whatever reason just don't want to ask it, feel free to fill out the feedback or contact forms on the Kansas CSW webpage. We are more than happy. In fact, we welcome your feedback, and we're more than happy to answer them there. But we do have one question right now from an anonymous attendee. Elian, this might be another process question we're still sort of working out. The anonymous attendee is asking how CDDOs will be notified about the annual limit. So when participants, start to approach that 20,000, are getting closer, so on and so forth.
Yeah, so when an individual is first applying for the waiver, they'll work with their CDDO to kind of assess whether their needs could likely be met under a $20,000 limit, and the CDDO will help advise them about whether or not the CSW sounds like a good fit for them based off of given that $20,000 limit. And then once the person is receiving services, their care coordinator, in some instances, their support broker or other individuals will help manage their limit and make sure that their needs are being met inside of that. pause here though to throw it back to KDADS in the event there's more information you all can provide about how a participant's supports CDDO, MCO, etc. help people manage their annual limit and make sure that they don't need to go over it.
So Eliana, I think you covered most of it. Just keep in mind that plans of service won't go for anything over the 20,000 at this point. So, you know, you can't hire someone and have them work more than what you have budgeted for. So we'll be working through that, all the different steps. But it'd be important that you work with your case manager, support broker if you have one, an FMS provider, and CDDO to make sure you're staying within your limits. And we'll be working out some more details on that so that people have, you know, regular contact with those folks to help them keep on their budget for the year.
Thanks, Michelle.
Elian, our next question, I believe you're in charge of the slides, correct me if I'm wrong.
I am.
Excellent. All right, so we have a question from Carrie Cosgrove regarding something on the previous slide. If it says that the MCO care coordinator can decide if an individual needs to transition to another waiver. Yeah, so you can see, Carrie, it's down there at the bottom. That last bullet, the MCO care coordinator considers transitioning the participant to another HCBS waiver program, that can accommodate the participant's needs. So, Elian, I think what Kerry says is broadly true, but I would like to point out, and correct me if I'm wrong, that it would probably be inaccurate to say that the care coordinator can decide if the individual transition. They would propose, they would suggest, and then it would be up to the individual or their designated decision maker to ultimately make that decision. Would that be accurate, Elian?
Yeah, thanks for that clarification, Peter. An MCO care coordinator won't just kind of decide on their own that a person needs to change waivers. You know, that's a process that, as you say, Peter, involves, you know, the participant, their guardian or representative if they have one, presumably also their case manager will assist in that process. This is more so just saying that in the event that the CSW may not be meeting a participant's needs, the MCO care coordinator is in a position to sort of identify that other options may be available on other waivers and kind of lead that process.
Thank you, Elian. A question about affiliations with CDDOs. An anonymous attendee notes that we said that home modification services do not have to affiliate with CDDOs. What service providers will be required to affiliate with the CDDO? So, Elian, I'll give you space to answer in just a second. Before I do, anonymous attendee, I will say we have a lot more information about all of these services available on the Kansas CSW website. So please do, you know, check out the information there, and you'll probably find some answers and a whole bunch of other information we hope will be useful for you as well. That being said, Elian, if you want to, you know, save them a little bit of time, I'm happy to hear what you have to say on this.
Yeah, my understanding is that all service providers will need to affiliate with the CDDO with the exception of modification service providers. As you mentioned, though, we have a whole lot more information on the website about the services, the affiliation requirements, all of that. And we do encourage you all to check it out.
Thank you, Elian. A question from Lisa Kinkle about transitioning between the CSW and the IDD waiver. Lisa asks if somebody goes, I think this is sort of a process one. Let me describe it. So based on Lisa's question, they're describing a situation where somebody was on the IDD waiver, went to the CSW, and now wants to go back to the IDD waiver. In that case, would they hold their spot on the wait list that they had before? You know, let's say they were 15th on the wait list, or would they go to the bottom of it? Lisa, this is a good question. It's also a very specific question. I imagine, Elian, our answer here is going to be, you know, we're still working on those transition details.
No, I can answer that one actually.
Excellent.
So If one is on the IDD waiver waiting list and they transition to the CSW, they will not be able to hold their spot on the IDD waiver waiting list. It is against Kansas policy to be on a waiting list for one waiver while receiving services on another. So it is not possible for somebody to hold their spot. And the same is more or less true as well if somebody is on the IDD waiver itself, they're receiving IDD waiver services, and then they decide to transition to the CSW. Their spot won't be held for them per se on the IDD waiver, but if the CSW is not meeting their needs, they very well may qualify for the crisis exception policy on the IDD waiver that allows people in crisis to skip the waiting list and receive services. So if somebody's needs are not being met and that's posing, a significant risk to them as a result and of being on the CSW, there are resources in place to help people get IDD waiver services more quickly. But yet, in many cases, what would happen if a person wanted to change back to the IDD waiver is that they would be placed at the bottom of the IDD waiver waiting list.
Thank you, Eliana. And you just mentioned the crisis exception. Our next two questions relate to that, so I'll just ask you to sort of put a pin on this. Let's say an individual wanted to transition between waivers. Is a crisis exception required? Is that process the only way to do that?
No, so there are kind of a handful of options. The first being that you can simply enroll on the waiting list for the waiver that you would like to be receiving services on. So if you're on the CSW and you no longer want to be on it, one option for you is to unenroll from the CSW and enroll in the IDD waiver waiting list. The second option is that there may be reserve capacity available on the IDD waiver for a group that you are a part of, and that includes individuals who are experiencing crisis. So if you are, I know at the beginning of this presentation, I showed you the reserve capacity groups for the CSW. The IDD waiver has a number of those same groups. It also has this crisis exception policy that we have been talking about. So if you fall into one of the groups on the IDD waiver for the reserve capacity, or you are in crisis, you may be able to receive services right away on the IDD waiver rather than waiting on the waiting list.
And then we have one more question, at least for now. Eliane, suppose an individual is offered a spot on the CSW waiver. Let's also assume they're already on the IDD waitlist. Could they decline that spot on the CSW and remain on the IDD waitlist if for some reason they preferred that?
Absolutely. Yeah, no one will ever make you give up your waiting list spot to enroll in the CSW. And given the priority enrollment policy, if you are on the IDD waiver waiting list and a spot is available for you on the CSW and you choose to decline it to stay on the IDD waiver waiting list, at any point you can change your mind and decide to apply for the CSW. And because you are already on the IDD waiver waiting list, you will benefit from the priority enrollment granted to IDD waiver waiting list individuals who have their applications. Those applications will be processed in front of other applicants to the CSW who are not on the IDD waiver waiting list. So that means is that you may decline an option and then apply later, and your application will be processed more quickly because it will be part of the group of applicants who are on the IDD waiver waiting list.
Thank you, Eliane. That takes care of questions for the moment. So I will take this time to give my small speech again. Obviously, we appreciate everybody joining us for the town halls. That's why we hold these, for you to get more information. That being said, we have a lot of information on that website. You can see it there, kansascsw.com. There you can find previews of quite a few of the appendices in the CSW. If you'd like to sort of get a jump start on looking at those, you can find a breakdown of the different services included in the CSW. And you can also find recordings of each of the town halls we've done thus far. So if you do have other questions about the CSW, or if you just want to learn more about it, get up to date, we do encourage you to visit that website. That's a resource we've set up for you. It also gives you a chance to comment on those draft appendices we have up, as well as send us any other more general questions or feedback. So please do visit that website if you get a chance. And then obviously you can email us at kansascsw@pcgus.com with questions or comments at any time. So with that, I will throw it open to questions one last time, give people a last minute or so to get in any more that they might have. All right, I'm not seeing any more as yet. So Sari, I will throw it to you if you'd like to do our final send off.
Thank you, Peter. Thank you all for joining us for this August town hall for the community support waiver. We really appreciate your questions and we're looking forward to hearing any further feedback. Thank you all. Bye.